It's all about a really sinister plot to try to curb the population. And it just so happens that Africa, by and large, has the highest birth rate.
Reducing population growth, that's this big benefit. The key thing you can do to reduce population growth is actually improve health.
In the developed countries, the big winners are countries that have shrinking populations.
I would like to reduce the number of people on the planet because there's too many of us.
Potential implications. However, some critics raise concerns that contraceptive programs in Africa may be perceived as externally imposed population control. Obviously. Y'all, I really wish Bill Gates would just sat down somewhere. I mean, I don't really talk about him that much, but he really gets on my nerves because I feel like he's in everybody else's business, trying to take control. I mean, he has been very open and explicit about his desires to try to curb the human population. Just weird, stuff. It just creeps me out. So a recent report dropped that shows that he has now released the first contraception for African women. Also, why are you so pressed about what's going on in Africa? There are plenty of issues going on in America. American women, literally just many of them are complaining about the fact that they have lost the right for birth control. They're just, women's rights with respect to their body. So you're so pressed now about what's going on in a whole other continent. Meanwhile, people in your own nation are struggling, women in particular. So already I'm just like, I don't believe none of this. I don't think any of this has to do with trying to improve anybody or improve the life of African women or the world. To me, it's all about a really sinister plot to try to curb the population. And it just so happens that Africa, by and large, has the highest birth rate compared to all continents. The top countries with the highest birth rate are in Africa. And I think Bill Gates is fully aware of that. But anyways, let's get into the article. It says the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is set to launch a new long-acting contraceptive in Africa, beginning with Kenya later this year as part of the US $2.5 billion commitment to accelerate research and expand services for the health of African women. They do not care about African women. To me, they do not. This is just about control. Melinda Gates Foundation is launching a new affordable long-term contraceptive in Africa, starting with Kenya. The contraceptives, including a hormonal IUD effective for up to 8 years and a contraceptive patch, aim to address obstacles such as cost and accessibility. While receiving praise, concerns were raised about the ethical implications of externally funded family planning initiatives in Africa. So again, family planning, it's always going to come under these ideas of we want to help you, we want to empower you, we want to give you access to better resources, etc. But it always comes at a cost. So you're testing out this contraceptive that can basically have ladies be infertile for up to 8 years. I don't buy it. I do not buy it at all. What I really think what's going on, not only with him, but you're going to see this with a lot of other people in power who hide behind the scenes but are trying to control the world. They're targeting Africa right now because what was this report that released a few years ago that said by 2050, 1 out of 4 people in the world are expected to be African, of African descent. Africans have hella kids, a lot of kids. And this is happening at the same time in the West that, by the way, actually depends upon Africa and Africa's resources. It's happening at the same time that the population in the West, the European population particularly, is declining. So you have the imperialist nations or the nations that are in power who are losing the population, while at the same time we have the exploited nations, those who are providing the resources for the imperialist power. They're growing. They're getting more populated. They're getting more people. Ultimately, I think that's just seen as a threat. Just on a basic level, I think a lot of people see that as a threat. So this is why you have companies who are going in there and they're trying to release all these initiatives and release AI technology because they ultimately want to control what's going on before it gets out of hand. They want to ensure that even if they become the minority population, they are still in control of the resources in Africa and in a lot of these nations. And I think that's ultimately what's driving these kinds of initiatives. I don't think it's really to help people. This is what's really, I think, concerning, right? It says Niger birth rate per 1,000, 44.5 in Niger. In Central African Republic, it's 42.3 every 1,000 people. For Chad, it's 42.1. Somalia, 42.1. Democratic Republic of Congo, 41.1. Mali, 40.5. So now let's compare that to some of the lowest birth rates, right? Let's say, for example, some of the lowest birth rates you have in Japan, for every 1,000 people, you have 6.65 births. In Italy, it's 6.88. Yikes. In Vatican City, it's 4.63. Hong Kong, 5.43. So, just case in point, the West West in general is the population, and specifically the white population, is declining. At the same time, the Black African population is increasing. That is a threat to those who see that as a threat. To me, it doesn't have to be, but if you understand the relationship between the West and some of these other nations and how the West depends upon the resources, usually at the expense of those nations, then it starts to make sense why like people do this weird stuff. Listen, I don't pretend to know everything and be like the top expert in geopolitics. I think a first word to see that this dude does not have good intentions. He is a descendant of people who were promoting eugenics, okay, and Planned Parenthood, and he's just been continuing the legacy of his family. I wish he would just stop. Anyways, okay, so let's see what else. Here it says this innovation is by the Bill Melinda Gates Foundation, follows research showing poor health outcomes for African women, particularly those in underserved communities, and limited R&D funding for women's health conditions beyond cancer. The new contraceptive, an affordable hormonal device, is designated or designed to be effective for up to 8 years and will provide a discreet option for women in low-income households. The device is inserted into the uterus, where it releases progestin, a synthetic hormone that thickens cervical mucus to prevent sperm from reaching a fertilized egg. Yeah, so basically it's just kind of giving you the rundown of potential implications. However, some critics raise concerns that contraceptive programs in Africa may be perceived as externally imposed population control. Obviously, he said this openly. It says the notion further suggests that the continent is being used as a testing ground for global health innovations. Yes, it is. Noting that similar large-scale rollouts are less visible in wealthier nations. Exactly. Considering concerns from billionaires like Elon Musk and Western pro-life activists about declining populations in their own countries, which highlight contrasting demographic priorities, critics argue that the new program not only focuses on population control, but also risks taking away one of Africa's major advantages, its growing population. I couldn't have said it better myself. I don't trust anything that man is doing, because all you gotta do is look at what he's actually said out of his mouth and the things that he and his family have been about up to this point. To me, it's really clear that, as he mentioned before, Africa has a huge, growing, booming population at the same time that these wealthier nations, their population is declining. And these wealthier nations are wealthy because of the resources they extract from Africa. Not only natural resources, but also labor. That's just what it is. That's just capitalism, right? So in order to keep that structure intact, like, you have to ensure that Africa remains under control. You can't have too much of this leverage or having too much power and control, because if that happens, then that's going to really, really compromise the system that is already enact. And I think they see that. And I think many of them are going in and trying to mitigate what's going on. Anyways, y'all, those are my thoughts. What do you think? Do you think I'm reading into this too much? Am I being too conspiratorial? Or do you agree? This whole thing to me is weird and annoying. And I'm like, I mean, you ain't got better things to do. But hey, that's just my thoughts. Y'all, let me know what you think down in the comment section. Thank you so much for listening if you've gotten this far, and we'll talk later. Bye.
I'm really excited to announce my new kids book, Aisha Learns to Love Her Hair. Aisha's hair is stunning, but she struggles to see its beauty. Through encouragement and wisdom from Grandma Lily, Aisha learns powerful lessons about self-acceptance. Aisha's journey is a heartwarming tale of family, culture, and confidence. Share her magical journey with your little loved one today, available for purchase.